You're listening to DraftKings Network.
The Jon Anik and Kenny Florian podcast. Jon Anik and Kenny Florian.
I f***ing love them. I can't get enough of them.
Let's hear that Boston next.
Big jab there from Duffy, and Frank Mir is hurt now. Down goes Duffy, out cold. Frank Mir does it again. Rock'em sock'em robots here. Oh my goodness.
Hyperbole.
There are a couple of absolutely self-involved bullshit artists.
Here are your hosts, Jon Anik and Kenny Florian.
Headshot, bang.
All right, second episode of the week. And this pay-per-view week is just so explosive. Can't wait to get to Abu Dhabi. That will soon be my reality. Thanks to everybody for checking back in. It is episode 521 of the Anik and Florian podcast, wherever you may be watching or listening, whether it's on the DraftKings Network, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcast. We appreciate that. KenFlo, how are we feeling, kid? Charlotte, North Carolina today, yes?
Yes. Just very excited for these fights, man. I cannot wait to break it down with Petrie. Curious to see which way he goes.
Do you have like a gun on your hip right now? Am I allowed to ask that?
I do not. Not. No.
All right.
No, not
What's
at
the
moment.
deal with like concealed weapons permits in North Carolina?
You got to get approved. You got to do a course. You got to do this whole amount of like paperwork. In my particular county, it's a pain in the ass, but I got it.
Of course you got it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to reveal to us as to whether or not there might be a pistol within arm's reach, but the answer is probably. So real quick, we talked to Daniel Cormier earlier in the week, and I had probed him on Donald Cerrone because oftentimes when commentators say things on a podcast or on a YouTube channel, it gets repurposed and it becomes news. And I had heard Donald Cerrone suggest that he wanted to come back and compete after using steroids or other drugs, right? But Daniel's comments obviously reverberated with the MMA masses. And when we brought it up, you weren't aware of it. So now that you're aware of it, bro, like once you openly say that you have gone on these drugs to then get off of them and get back into the testing pool, I would imagine for some competing athletes, that would give them pause to sign the contract, even for a name as big as Donald Cowboy Cerrone.
Right.
But promotionally, I would think that would be a precedent you're really not looking to set.
Unless they're on it as well. Well, I'll say this. I think that it depends on, first of all, I guess, what he was doing. You know, is it like a series of steroids? Is it testosterone replacement therapy? You know, how much time are they going to give him to get off of it? All of that stuff. You know, will he be tested throughout camp and all that process? So I have a problem with it for just a completely different reason in that, you know, listen, if he's being tested, everyone else being tested, okay, fine. Because other people have done it, Connor, all that stuff, okay? He will be, and you know, DC, I think is what he was alluding to, is that people will accuse him of, hey, the reason you won is because of this. And that will kind of open up criticism to him for that. My issue is more than, is a little different, is that you are not going to feel the same on it as opposed to off of it. So yes, he's probably feeling great right now, but if he goes off of all that stuff and decides to get into a long training camp and go into fight, he's probably not going to feel the same. So, you know, he's had a great career, man. I'd love to see Donald hang it up, man. He's accomplished a lot in this sport. But if he wants to fight, yeah, he can fight, but let's do it in a good way, in a legal way.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and certainly Dana White's dismissive nature of those comments, I think, were a good thing, even if maybe that wasn't exactly what Dana was getting at. So some interesting stuff there. UFC 308 beckons here in a few days. Topuria versus Holloway. And when the fight card was first announced, I know there were certain fights on this card, Kenny, like Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov, and that's a fight that has since been moved off of this card.
Yeah.
But my gosh, man. Like, I wasn't trying to sound hyperbolic when I suggested that UFC 308 was like the best fight card I had ever been assigned. And at least when it comes to like the last two fights of the night, you can't stack a pay-per-view any better than Khamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker leading into Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway, a championship main event that some are suggesting is the best fight single-handedly we can put together.
Well, you know, from an energy standpoint, as a commentator looking at this fight, it's going to be insane. You know, anytime someone like Chimaev is on the card, it's going to be special. And that's further compounded by some other stars in Whittaker and Topuria and Holloway. But from a technical standpoint, if you are a fan of the sport, if you are a fighter currently involved in this sport, the technical level that Topuria and Holloway are bringing to the cage with all of their pedigree and everything they've accomplished is insane. This is about as high level as it gets. Who is the best 145 pounder in the world? I don't know who that is right now, but we're going to find out on Saturday night, and that's what makes this event so cool.
Very excited to finally get KenFlo and Brian Petrie's predictions on all of the fights at UFC 308, but chief among them, of course, Ilia Topuria and Khamzat Chimaev, about minus 240 or so favored against Max Holloway and Robert Whittaker, respectfully. I'd imagine a lot of people are going to be attacking the board in a lot of different ways, a lot of fights on which to bet at UFC 308. But also on the hardwood, folks, the NBA is finally back, and a new season means new ways to get into the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who's draining threes from beyond the arc? Who's eating glass and grabbing rebounds? Well, you can get behind your favorite players and all the proposition bets you can make right now on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. And if it is your first time on the DraftKings Sportsbook application, new DraftKings customers, you bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Every point counts with DraftKings Sportsbook, so download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code AFPOD. That's code AFPOD for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crowd is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/bball. All right, 3 wide we go as we welcome on our chief handicapper here on the Anik and Florian podcast. He is Big Gun Brian Petrie, host of the MMA Takes podcast, and ready to bring us his UFC 308 selections right here, right now.
It's the main event challenge. Anik.
The time is most definitely now.
Florian.
I finish fights! I'm going to do everything possible to win.
The main event challenge. The Jon Anik and Kenny Florian podcast.
Big Gun, how we doing? Good day to you. How'd your weekend go?
Not too bad. Not too bad. My Bengals won, which is always good. 3-4, not too bad on the year. And then we hit some winners on the fight. Cameron Smotherman, big underdog. Cashed on him. I needed it. I've been a little bit icy, so it was good.
Yeah, Cameron Smotherman, the short notice replacement who beat Jake Hadley. It was interesting. He was talking about when he got the call from his manager as to whether or not he could accept this short notice UFC fight. And so he pulled a DC. Here's what he said. I'm not about to let this chance go to waste. And so I take a picture. I grabbed the wall and just gave myself a little DC boost and took the picture of my weight and sent it. So showing his manager what his weight is, posted on the wall a little bit. Not a bad thought.
No,
also,
guy.
I would think a lot of different ways, Kenny, to manipulate a scale when you are not in the presence of the other individual.
For sure.
Shout out to Mike Dolce, by the way, who would always hawkeye that scale. I mean, things have changed when it comes to these weigh-ins, right? But when his opponent would weigh in, right, because you would weigh in at the same time as your opponent, Dolce would hawkeye that scale to make sure that people weren't getting away with a few wayward ounces there. All right, no pronunciation of the week, which means we will get right to our predictions. UFC 308, Topuria versus Holloway. We have a featured prelim selection, Brian. We will begin with you here in the welterweight division. Number 10, Jeff Neal, minus 310, Rafael Dos Anjos, plus 250. So how about this, fellas? Rather fittingly, RDA, former lightweight champion, celebrating his 40th birthday the night of UFC 308. 36th UFC appearance for the future Hall of Famer here against Jeff Neal. BP, who do you like?
Yeah, it's an interesting fight, right? Because I think Jeff Neal has the ceiling to be something special. He's just a little inconsistent. I wanted more from him in the Gary fight, and I think he has a lot more. I know some of his early losses were stuff outside the cage, maybe mental, but the guy's got it. He really does. Really strong takedown defense as well, and I think that's what RDA has to do to win this fight. The problem is I don't like RDA at 170 when he wants to be a grappler. I think he's a little undersized at 170 when he wants to grapple. I think his wrestling is very good, but with the big guys at 70, I think it's a problem. I think he can bully ball people at 55, at 70. Yeah. It pushes it for me. And I think Jeff Neal, with his good takedown defense, has the better striking. RDA can land some really good leg kicks. He's got a good number next to his name. So if you want to take Rafael dos Anjos and you want to really cash in on your money, go for it. But I'm going to take Jeff Neal, and you better not spell it with a J. It's a G, baby. Jeff Neal, he's going to keep a G for this fight.
Yeah, it's like the giraffe at Toys R Us, where Kenny and I grew up buying toys.
Hey, me too. Me too. Yeah.
Jeffrey, like Geoff, Geoff Neal. He was 7-2 in the UFC, KenFlo, after a win over Vicente Luque late 2022. 2 straight losses, though, now have Jeff Neal at a more pedestrian 7-4 in the octagon. Lost a split to Ian Machado Gary. That was UFC 298 in Anaheim, and now making his second start of the year here in Abu Dhabi. And interestingly enough, it's Neal's first fight outside of North America and just his second fight outside of the U.S. KenFlo, your thoughts on it, if you would.
That's interesting. Nice little tidbit there. Wonder how that affects him. But, Jeff is a guy who's tough to take down. And assuming he's healthy, I think this is a pretty straightforward win for him. Not an easy fight, but if it stays on the feet, I think Neal should win. And RDA is an absolute legend. But time is undefeated, of course. You mentioned he's going to be 40. And, it's going to be tough for him to utilize that speed to get in and get out and also to score takedowns, in my opinion. So I like Jeff. I like Geoff here.
Nice.
All right, pay-per-view main card opener in the middleweight division. Shara Bullet Magomedov, minus 192, taking on Armen Petrosyan, who is plus 160. So, Bri, you know the rage that is Shara Bullet. He is 3-0 in the UFC right now. Figures to be a good test, I think, right here at this stage of his UFC career. The Armenian Muay Thai wrecking machine Petrosyan has some signature wins, right? Beat Gregory Rodriguez in his UFC debut. The experience against Caio Borralho. How competitive do we think this pay-per-view opener is in the middleweight division, BP?
I think it's really competitive. I was a little lukewarm on Shara when he came here. He was the rage. I saw him on Reddit. Everyone loved him. This one-eyed pirate. He's coming to fucking steal all the gold. And he's done really well in the UFC, I think. And I think he keeps getting better. My only hiccup is really loading up on him is he got taken down 3 times by Mihail Oleksiejczuk. And that worries me because that's a striker, right? And he got taken down 3 times by him. But he has a really good kicking game. His boxing game is working itself out. His cardio is proven to be elite. And this is where he likes to fight in Abu Dhabi. This is where he's going to excel. And Petrosyan, he's a guy that really keeps his own pace. He likes to kick a lot too. His boxing's a little kind of weak. He's mixing grappling in there. He typically fights guys that want to take him down. He's not going to have that in Shara here, so this could be interesting. It's going to be a good striking fight. I'm going to back Shara Bullet here at the number. I wish I can get on the underdog side here. I can't. I like Shara Bullet.
Nicely done. KenFlo, Shara Bullet, about a 2-1 favorite right now on DraftKings Sportsbook. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with Brian. I think this should be a striking fight, and I think if either tries to utilize their grappling, I think it's probably just going to be null and void. I don't see it really being that effective. Both are just not really known for that necessarily. Armen might be the slightly better grappler, but Magomedov just seems a little bit more fluid, a little bit more loose on his feet with a little bit more weapons than Petrosyan. Petrosyan is a little bit more stiff, maybe has more power than Magomedov, but yeah, I like Magomedov here as well.
All right, next up, light heavyweight title eliminator to be sure. Number 2, Magomed Ankalaev, minus 410. Taking on 5th-ranked Alexander Rakic, who is plus 320. So Rakic hasn't won a fight, KenFlo, since he beat Thiago Santos. That was UFC 259 in 2021. Injury is a big reason why, of course, but here he's a plus 320 underdog trying to avoid a 3rd straight loss and taking on Ankalaev, seemingly 1 win away from that elusive 2nd title shot and first crack at Poetan. KenFlo, lead us off with the light heavyweight contenders, if you would be so kind. Ankalaev, minus 410, or Rakic, plus 320.
Yeah, I think Rakic is a very dangerous guy, especially early on. He's very explosive. He's very fast. He certainly has knockout power, has struggled with injuries, as you mentioned, but just not versatile enough, in my opinion, to be able to deal with someone like Ankalaev. Now, of course, he could catch Ankalaev early and then maybe, win the fight early. But I think Ankalaev is going to mix in his striking, but mainly to look for a takedown, put Rakic on his back. That's when we've seen him most vulnerable. Rakic is very athletic. He's good at getting back to his feet at times. But I think Ankalaev's ability to grind out a win is going to kind of take place here. So I like Ankalaev.
Brian, Ankalaev is 19-1-1 with a no contest, right? So He's won 19 of 22 pro fights, but 2 of his last 3 have ended draw and no contest. Last fight was impressive, the finish of Johnny Walker in January. Many believe Ankalaev to be the class of this division. At the very least, a lot of people think he would be the betting favorite against Poatan. First things first, your thoughts on how competitive this one is against the also top 5 Alexander Rakic.
I tell you what, for Ankalaev, who doesn't speak English all that well, he's talking a lot of good shit out there, isn't he? He's putting his name out there, right?
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of talk where he got passed over because he's a little bit boring. I saw him fight live against Jan Blachowicz. That was not a great fight. Immediately after, Jan Blachowicz and Jamal Hill fought in January for the title, so there are some things out there about Ankalaev. I think he's a tremendous fighter. I think in the Jan fight, he got exposed a little bit. He got leg kicked up a little bit, got his wheel taken off, and he had to rely on his wrestling. With Rakic here, Rakic coming off an ugly loss to Yuri where he got knocked around a little bit. I think this guy's dangerous in this spot for an underdog. I also think his takedown offense is very good. He's big for the division. Is Ankalaev that good of a grappler to take him down and smother him? I don't know. But if they play on the feet, which is Ankalaev is saying what he wants to do to Poatan, and I think he's coming in here maybe looking past Rakic. Also, I think he's coming in here going, I need to do something special to maybe get that next shot to get my name out there. That's all recipe for disaster. When you're putting a big number against Alexander Rakic, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take him right here as a little dog shot over Ankalaev.
There you go.
I think Ankalaev is a good fighter, but I think he might get hung up here because Rakic is definitely not a stepping stone. I think he's going to get it done. Very
interesting. And that would be a quite the ladder you'd have to get on to step on him, right?
Yeah.
Rakic, 6'5.5". All right, featured bout at featherweight. Right back to you, Brian Petrie. We got 12th ranked Lerone Murphy, minus 198, taking on number 14, Dan Ige, who is plus 164. Strongly encourage all you folks to check out our interview with Dan Ige live from Abu Dhabi earlier this week. I thought his comments were particularly telling, especially when it comes to Max Bless Holloway and their recent sparring sessions together. But on this fight, Manchester, England's Murphy Bry, 14-0-1, the near 2-1 favorite here. Shined in his first UFC main event against Edson Barboza. That was back in May, and now going for his 7th straight UFC win against the dog Dan Ige. BP, your thoughts?
Yeah, my biggest knock on Lerone Murphy was he just wasn't, he fought at his own pace, and he lulled people in his own pace. He's a very technical fighter, but in the Barboza fight, he landed 220 strikes. That's a hell of a pace, to keep up. And I think he's got Dan Ige beat. I think Dan Ige is a dog in there. That guy's all dog. Not like he's a sloppy fighter by any means, but I think Lerone is just really tight. I think Dan Ige is going to need to turn this into a little bit of an ugly fight here. Get in, get clinched up, beat him up inside, make it not so pretty, because Lerone Murphy, at his own distance, at his own pace, is a very dangerous fighter. I think he's very underrated. If he fought a little more, I think maybe this guy get talked about. Takedown offense, great. Cardio, great. Striking, great. Doesn't have the finishing numbers I would like to see, but again, very good here. I don't see him putting out Dan Ige. I like the over in this fight. And if you're making me pick a winner, which is what we do here, I'm going to go Lerone Murphy, but no disrespect to Dan Ige. I saw the interview. I think he's a phenomenal person. And again, taking the fight on Diego Lopez, that's just Mount Rushmore MMA stuff right there alone. So should be a good scrap.
Yeah, KenFlo, I'm not sure much more needs to be said of what Dan Ige did in stepping up against Diego Lopez at UFC 303, even though I have said repeatedly, like, it's a real pain in the ass for the featherweight, for fellow contenders when you have a guy locally who, is going to step into that setting. But overall for Ige, Kenny, some uneven results, I guess, since the Gavin Tucker knockout, which was 2021. At that point, he had won 6 of 7, was on the cusp of legitimate contention. He's lost 5 of his last 8, but what an opportunity, right, to potentially take Murphy's O and reestablish himself here as a contender.
Yeah, between you and Brian, no lies detected. I think that, the only thing I would say is that sometimes you get a win or you have a performance, even in loss, that can kind of rekindle that spirit and go, listen, I have a chance to get back to a world-class level. I have a chance to kind of get back into, to have an opportunity to challenge for the belt one day and get on a streak. And, the fact that he had a knockout win against Andre Fili prior to that fight against Lopez, where he performed extremely well given the circumstances. I think that Murphy is probably the more technical fighter. I think there's no question about it, and you can't doubt that level of consistency. However, where I do have a little bit of doubt is just with the level of competition. And Murphy did get touched up a little bit against Barboza. You don't want to get touched up too much against someone like Ige, because I do think in regards to the hands, he hits harder than Barboza. So, Ige's underdog here. I think there's enough value for on him for me to go that way. So I kind of like Ige here.
Oh, I'm liking this main event challenge today. You boys are barking on some underdogs.
Yeah.
With that, we get to the co-main event. I have been waiting months. Although, did you guys pick this fight for Saudi Arabia? No, it got canceled before fight week.
Yeah, we didn't pick it. Never did.
So, yeah, I have been waiting fucking months. All right, Mum? Co-main event, 5 rounds if needed in the UFC's middleweight division. Not a main event in Saudi Arabia, but a co-headliner at Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi. The 12th ranked contender, still undefeated, Khamzat Borz Chimaev, minus 225, taking on the 3rd ranked Bry, former champion, Robert the Reaper Whittaker, who is plus 185 or so. I mean, these betting lines have been bouncing a little bit, but Whittaker at 1 point plus 164, then almost at plus 200. I'm just fascinated to see how it plays out. We know that Khamzat Chimaev, when healthy, really commands a lot of attention, and he will do so this Saturday night or afternoon as well. Brian Petrie, we need a co-main event prediction, not now, but right now.
Yeah, that's the biggest question is what Khamzat's going to show up. I'm hoping this fight stays together because Chimaev is electric to watch. He's a superstar. You see him wrestling with Olympic gold medalists on his Instagram. He's going rounds with them and they're scrambles and they're nuts, right? But the thing about Chimaev is he's a 5th gear fighter, probably the best 1-round fighter there is, right? But when you drop him down to the 4th gear and the 3rd gear, he becomes human. And the Kamaru Usman fight is a perfect example. The Gilbert Burns fight's another example. If he doesn't blitz you out of there in round 1, he starts to become human because he's almost superhuman in that first round.
Yeah.
So strong and aggressive, and he goes for it, and he has submissions and his power. And you got Robert Whittaker, who doesn't really give up many takedowns, right? Yoel Romero's really the only guy who had kind of success, but he popped right back up. Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker is the dude, and he's hawking a little bit this week. He's saying, I'm knocking this dude out. I'm getting up. I'm stuffing his takedown.
Yeah.
I'm going to punch him. I like that. I like seeing that aggression because Chimaev is just so nonchalant. I smash, brother. I'm smashing everyone, brother. This dude, this is a competitive, high-level MMA fight, and I'm so excited to even bring it up, even talk about it, even watch it. But when I look down at the tape, I think Chimaev might just have an extra gear we're going to see here. He looks in shape. He looks good. And I think if he beats Bobby Knuckle, he has to do it within round 1, maybe first half of 2. And then you flip your bet and you live bet Bobby Knucks. I think that's the way to play this fight here. Like most Chimaev fights, I played Kamaru Usman. After that first round, I said, I think Usman's going to be in this, and I almost won. It was a majority decision. So I think that's how you play a Chimaev fight. I think after the first round, if you survive, you maybe flip sides here, but pre-fight, I think Chimaev is a special guy. I'm going to go Chimaev.
Nicely done. KenFlo, Robert Whittaker on the other side, still just 33 years of age, 17-5 in the UFC after maximizing that showcase against the short notice replacement, Ikram Alaskarov in Saudi Arabia. And he just has responded in kind, right, to that loss to Dricus du Plessis. That was not that long ago. UFC 290, July of 2023. Couple straight wins. Now have Whittaker on the cusp of a potential rematch with the South African. But despite all of the recent success, still a pretty heavily priced underdog here against Chimaev. Dying to know who you like in the co-main, KenFlo.
Yeah, and I would bring up that DDP fight as an example of Whittaker struggling off of his back, right? I mean, because, Dricus was all over him there and certainly hurt him on the feet as well. But to me, Whittaker on his back actually playing guard didn't look too great to me. If he's on top, if he's stopping takedowns, he looks really good. How he does against Chimaev, I'm not sure. I think that Whittaker is going to be the more well-rounded striker, the more dangerous guy overall. Maybe not the more powerful guy, but I think he's the better striker for sure. And proven commodity, in the later rounds. No question about that. Couldn't agree more. But I like this Chimaev who seems extremely focused, isolating himself from everybody and going out into the mountains of Russia, training hard at altitude, training with high-level coaches like Buvaisar Saitiev's wrestling coach. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And for me, I think that, people criticize Chimaev and they're like, yeah, man, but look at Usman. He did really good. Guys, it's Usman. He had the belt for a long time. He's kind of a good fighter. And he's also a guy who's a really good wrestler. And I went back and watched that fight. And yeah, I mean, the second round, I think Usman probably won. That was really close. He didn't blow him out of the water. It's not like he, whipped him up. And in the third round, Chimaev kind of went back to hing what he was doing, hit the takedowns when he needed to and won that fight. I thought it was pretty clear. So, some of the criticisms I don't think are really that warranted. And I feel like this is the one where we're really going to find out, though, how good Chimaev is. And I believe he will probably succeed. I like Chimaev here. I think his grappling most likely will be too much. I'm also a little concerned with that lead hand of Whitaker being quite low because Chimaev has a pop in that right hand.
I love it, KenFlo. And yes, I think with respect to past fights against Gilbert Burns and against Kamaru Usman and those past fighters, right? We've often talked about Chimaev and his ability to make 70 long-term. And
yeah, that's ridiculous.
This is the night upon which we find out. Hopefully this fight stays together, right? Because it didn't in Saudi Arabia, right? But fighting a bona fide former champion in the division in which we know Khamzat Chimaev can sustain weight cutting or weight making success. This is the fight to find out if Khamzat Chimaev can get to that precipice. And if he beats Robert Whitaker, you got to think even if there's a weight, he will be next for the championship. Speaking of championships, featherweight title on the line. Ilia Topuria minus 238. Max Holloway plus 195. KenFlo, we will lead with you on this one. So Holloway was last the featherweight champion in 2019. Since he last challenged for the gold in this division, which was against Volkanovski at UFC 276 in 2022, he's won 3 in a row, last 2 by knockout. And now we see, Kenny, what he has for the calm, cool, confident, collected Spaniard, the champion Ilia Topuria, make it his first title defense here. You challenge for the belt in this division, Kenny Florian. Your thoughts on the featherweight championship that is now just days away?
Yeah, this is one of the most amazing matchups that we've had, I think, in a very, very long time. This is as good as it gets when it comes to high-level mixed martial arts. And can't wait, man. Genuinely excited for this one. Topuria. First of all, this is a guy with snake-like attacks. The way that he coils up and kind of lulls you into sleep, and then he shows his speed. And those off-rhythm attacks are extremely difficult to deal with, especially as the fight moves on. He has shown an intelligence that is far beyond his experience level. He has showed a toughness and a maturity that is far beyond his experience level. And he always seems to kind of deliver exactly what he said he was going to do. We haven't seen this level of precision and prediction from a lot of people. Conor McGregor in his prime, perhaps, but Topuria is something special. Make no mistake about it. And I think that he puts on this character in a way to mask how good of a technical fighter he really is. Everyone talks about Holloway's footwork. Well, there was a guy named Alexander Volkanovski who defeated Holloway not once but twice and did it with, in my opinion, footwork. 3 times. I'm sorry. Oh, my goodness. 3 times, right? And did it with footwork. Volkanovski has excellent footwork, and he's got multiple tools in his tool belt. Topuria took the right approach. He executed beautifully. First round was very close, but I thought Volkanovski probably edged him out. But the second round, Topuria started to find his mark and really settled in and landed a nasty combination. His power is phenomenal. Let's go to Max Holloway, who looked tremendous against Justin Gaethje. It was at 155 pounds, however, where I don't think Max Holloway is cutting that much weight to get, or not as much at 155. But Holloway is huge for featherweight. So I think that's kind of the question mark for me is how does he perform at 145 pounds? Now, conditioning, I don't think is going to be an issue. Power might. His pacing might a little bit, but maybe not. I mean, he's broken records at 145 pounds. So we shall see. My concern is going from 155 to gain the weight and then coming back to 145. That's where it can take its toll on you. So that's something we need to remember. So let's see how it goes. If there's one guy who could utilize his length, his skills, his experience, his toughness to get it done, it is Max Holloway. There's no question in my mind this guy can pull off this fight. However, when you have momentum and you have this guy in Topuria who seems to be a genuine superstar, who I don't think we've seen more than 50% of his skills in the cage still. I gotta go with Topuria here. I just think that the weight cut for me is a question mark. And when I see the general consensus of all the experts out there going the way of Holloway, I'm gonna go the opposite.
Dude, I get it, man. I get it. I mean, you got to look far and wide to find people on the favorite, Ilia Topuria, who is 15-0, 7-0 in the UFC after he wrested the belt, rather emphatically, by the way, from Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 298 earlier this year. I have trotted out this stat repeatedly. Max Holloway has spent 37.5% of his life on this UFC roster. I don't know if that's a good thing nor a bad thing. It certainly offers up a backdrop of all the experience that he has accrued, but I think a lot of people recognize just how special Ilia Topuria is and could be. Brian Petrie, It is crunch time. We need to know who leaves United Arab Emirates as the undisputed featherweight champion of the world.
I love this fight. This is one of my fights that I've been looking forward to all year. This has been circled forever. Topuria's favorite fighter is Topuria. This guy loves himself some him, right? You know what I mean? Which I kind of like, right? This dude is confident. He's all in. It could be a bit, could be a gimmick, but I'm in it. Like, the guy's legit. He has what the kids call aura, right? After round one over Volkanovski, which Volkanovski won that, he did some fancy footwork. Topuria was kind of shelling up, landing some shots himself, but mostly shelling up. But I knew. Body language, everything. I'm like, dude, this dude's going to fucking land something. He's going to cork something. We just knew. Topuria's phenomenal. And this is the guy I predicted wrong. I'm embarrassed to admit, not embarrassed because Bryce Mitchell's a very good fighter, but I picked Bryce Mitchell to beat Ilia Topuria. We all know how that showed up. Topuria's great. He's great. But Max Holloway is a special dude, is a guy that I've grown to really love. And I love that he's sparring again. I know it's not for everyone. No fighters take time off. But I think since he's been sparring, he's coming off 2 knockouts, one over the Zombie, one over Justin Gaethje. He's sitting down on punches a lot. And that's what sparring does. There is a reason people spar. I get it. You want to save your brain cells and all that. But there is a reason. Timing and to find out what works against other people. And I like that he's putting that back in his camp because I think he's looked really, really good in the Gaethje fight. In all the exchanges, he looked phenomenal. I love Max at 55. I never thought we would get this fight at 45 because I thought Max, after losing 3 times to Volkanovski, would just stay at 55. And I thought he looked great. Yeah. You know, there's just some people out there that you can't beat. He lost to Volkanovski 3 times. Matt Hughes lost to Dennis Holman 2 or 3 times. Daniel Cormier couldn't get past John Jones. John can't beat Jason. There's just some things. I had to throw that in there. Throw that in there. That's okay. There's just some people that just can't get past certain people. But I think Max Holloway is a special guy, and I think his range and length is going to be an issue here. I'm worried about the leg kicks, and I'm worried about the grappling. We haven't really seen Max get grappled up much. And Topuria is a hell of a grappler. He was tossing Bryce Mitchell, country strong, all over the cage. And I think if he takes Max Holloway down, it's going to be interesting here because we haven't really seen Max play that game yet. Yeah. On the feet, Topuria, a little bit smaller, but way more powerful. And I think Max is going to have to figure out a game plan. I think his camp, his team, his coaches, they're great at coming up with what works. So I'm going to take Max. I was going to literally had nothing written down. I was going to go opposite Kenny. I'm such on the fence of this fight, but I'm 50-50. So if Kenny went the other way, I went the other way. I'm going to go with Max Holloway. Bless, baby. It is what it is.
You guys hit on a lot of interesting themes, the sparring component, and then just the good weight that Max Holloway seemed to put on for the Justin Gaethje fight, as Kenny was referencing, right? To all of a sudden have to lose that muscle mass and sort of pivot. I don't know that it was his necessarily expectation that that his next fight was going to be at 45 after the BMF belt win over Gaethje. All right, let me update the standings if I could. UFC Fight Night, Hernandez versus Pereira. Team Petrie put his whole goddamn band $1,000 on Charles Johnson. That was minus 230, page of 434.78. Shaves your year to date down to minus 223.73. Team Florian, no action on the Jake Hadley wager. He fought a different opponent. You did give 400 back on Kyler Phillips, 200 also back on Michel Pereira by TKO. So minus 600, your year-to-date figure. Minus 1706.91, Petrie's lead, 1483. Place your bets for a pay-per-view week brought to you by JonAnik.com, where you can get 15% off of all Anik and Florian podcast merchandise with promo code OneMoreSleep. Halloween designs are out as well. Also, Bilal Muhammad's championship merchandise can only be purchased at JonAnik.com. Brian Petrie, you have the lead and a hot microphone, $2,000 to spend. UFC 308, Topuria versus Holloway. 14 fights, all of them at your disposal. Who do we like?
Yeah, so we kept it kind of nuts and bolts this one, right? We rifled off the fights. Kenny fucking did phenomenal. Johnny doing amazing, setting up the op. So I'm gonna keep it short. I got 3 bets. Three bets. Let's go 1K on Sarah Bullet. The Pirates coming for the gold. Let's go 500 on Jeff Neal with a G. Do not spell it with a J.
Okay.
And let's go 500 on Maxie Holloway.
Wow.
Let's go.
All right. So the Holloway price as of this taping that you are going to get will be plus 195.
Love it.
And that brings us to former 3-time UFC title challenger, Kenny Florian. $2,000 to spend, my man. UFC 308. Topuria versus Holloway, 3 p.m. Eastern on pay-per-view. You'd love it, Ken-Flo. Little matinee.
Yes. That's my favorite thing in the entire world. Midday fight card. Woo!
Dude, I'm going to be very, very excited for this. All right. Okay. So I got a little fancy. Typically when KenFlo gets a little fancy, it doesn't go well. So let's see what happens. All right. We got a few parlays here. Let's do the parlay, $250. Neal on Kalaev and Shara Bullet.
Okay.
And then our next parlay is another $250 for Neal, Chimaev, and Topuria.
Okay.
And then we got $250 on Chimaev.
Straight.
Yep. 1,000 on Topuria.
$1,000 straight wager on Topuria, which leaves you with $250 left.
Correct. And I'm going to hedge with Holloway, $250.
$250.
Hedge. Sonic the Hedgehog. I love it.
Fellas, great job. Brian Petrie on X at Brian Petrie MMA. Check out his MMA Takes podcast for a more comprehensive breakdown of the card. BP, much love, my man. We'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Safe travels, Johnny. I'll see you, bub.
Thank you, buddy. There he is, Brian Petrie, with us for the main event challenge. So Sunday night, my daughters go to the Taylor Swift concert, KenFlo. I'm putting my son to bed, and he says, "Why do you have hair on your arms like a gorilla?"
Why do you have hair on your arms like a gorilla, dude?
And I'm like, bro. Thankfully for his sake, my wife doesn't have a hair on her, and my mom, her arms are bald too. But it's like, bro, be careful what you say. Because you might too one day look like a gorilla and need to go to the European Wax Center and get a fucking back wax. So,
did you tell him that? Is he aware that has potential?
Well, I felt like that wasn't necessarily the right tenor before bed.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Because sometimes, when they rip off the small of your back portion, it doesn't feel great.
He's got an observant eye like his dad. Well done. Nice.
He does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was noticing my arms do look particularly hairy today. We got to get on out of here. Thanks to our producer, Cody Merrow, our handicapper, Brian Petrie. And if you did miss our episode earlier in the week, you can hear from Dan Ige, Eric Nixick on Francis Ngannou's win, Daniel Cormier, and Ray Longo as well. And we'll be right back with you next Monday, October 28th, to recap the piss out of this thing and see if it's Topuria or Holloway, Chimaev, or Whitaker. Thanks to everybody for subscribing, for checking out the show. We'll talk to you next week. Until then, for KenFlo, I'm Jon Anik. Yo, fucking later.
I love this shit.
To the bread, he's cornbread. Cornbread. He's cornbread. Cornbread. Life is so precious, do the best that you can. Keep your hands on the bar, hit the open man. He's cornbread. Cornbread. He's cornbread. Cornbread. He's cornbread.